Imagine standing before 10,000 alien judges, knowing that in the next 60 seconds, your entire species will be sentenced to exile from civilization itself. Now imagine smiling, because you already know something they don't. The grand chamber of the Veiled Conclave was not built for comfort. It was built to remind the small that they were small. A spherical hall 3 kilometers wide, its walls lined with the floating sigils of 9,412 member civilizations, all turned toward a single dais where one man stood alone. Captain Marcus Thorne did not flinch under the weight of their attention. He had flown through asteroid storms, watched friends die in first contact skirmishes, and buried more soldiers than he cared to count. A room full of disapproving aliens was, by comparison, almost restful. Representative Thorne intoned the Speaker of the Conclave, a being of shifting violet light known as Hesave. The Council has reviewed humanity's petition for full interstellar citizenship. We have studied your history, your wars, your weapons, your appetite for conflict. A low murmur rippled through the chamber, a sound like wind through dry grass. The collective unease of 1,000 species who had never known a war that lasted more than a generation, because their biology, their culture, their very nature had been built for peace. The verdict, Hesave continued, is unanimous. Humanity is judged unfit. You are hereby denied membership in the Conclave, denied access to core trade routes, and denied protection under galactic law. You are instructed to withdraw beyond the threshold, the edge of charted space, within one solar cycle. It was, by any measure, a death sentence. Beyond the threshold lay nothing but unmapped void dead systems, and the kind of cold that froze ambition before it froze flesh. Thorne let the silence stretch. Then he did the one thing no delegate in that chamber expected. He bowed. "Thank you, Speaker," he said, his voice calm, almost grateful. "You've just made the only decision that could save us both." Gasps rippled through alien throats that had never learned the human art of sarcasm wrapped in sincerity. Hesave's light flickered, confused. "Explain yourself." "You spent 10,000 years building a civilization on the assumption that you already found everything worth finding," Thorne said. "We haven't, and something tells me that's about to matter more than you know." He turned and walked out, his boots echoing through a hall that had just voted, unknowingly, to throw away its only hope of survival. 3 months later, the human Exodus fleet gathered at the edge of the solar system. 211 ships for 1 million people, every scrap of technology and culture humanity had ever built, crammed into hulls built for war and repurposed for flight. There were no parades, no final goodbyes broadcast across alien networks, just engines igniting in the dark, one by one, like a string of dying stars refusing to go out quietly. Among the crowd boarding the flagship Resolve, a young engineer named Captain Sarah Akonkolin stood at the viewport, watching Earth shrink behind her. "Do you really believe there's something out there?" she asked Thorne, who stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the threshold. "I believe," Thorne said slowly, "that a species afraid of war has no idea what's coming for all of us. And I believe humanity wasn't made to fit in. We were made for something else." "Made by who?" Thorne didn't answer. He didn't have an answer yet. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought had taken root the moment the Council rejected them. A thought he couldn't shake, couldn't explain, and couldn't ignore. This isn't an ending. This is the beginning of something they're not ready for. The fleet crossed the threshold at 0600 hours, ship's time. Behind them, the galaxy civilizations returned to their quiet, comfortable lives, certain they had solved their human problem. They had no idea they had just set humanity free. What do you do when you're cast into the darkest, coldest, most forgotten corner of the galaxy, and it turns out to be exactly where you were always meant to go? 23 years passed beyond the threshold. 23 years of rationed oxygen, jury-rigged engines, and children born who had never seen the blue sky of Earth. The fleet had shrunk to 180 ships. The rest lost engine failures, radiation storms, and the slow, grinding attrition of survival in uncharted dark. But humanity adapted. It always had. Sarah Alconquilin, now fleet engineer and Thorne's closest advisor, had spent 2 decades turning desperation into innovation. Recycling systems that should have failed years ago. Jury-rigged shield arrays patched together from scavenged debris. A culture of relentless problem-solving born from having no other choice. The alien civilizations had built empires on certainty. Humanity built a civilization on improvisation, because improvisation was the only thing the void allowed. It was Sarah who first detected the anomaly. "Captain, you need to see this." Her voice cracked through the comm at 0300 hours, urgent in a way that made Thorne, now gray-haired, harder around the eyes, but unmistakably the same man who had bowed before the conclave, abandoned sleep entirely. On the bridge, the sensor display showed something that defied every law of physics the fleet scientists understood. A structure, immense beyond comprehension, drifting in the black between two dead star systems. Not a planet, not a ship, something else entirely. A construct nearly the size of a moon, its surface lined with geometric patterns that pulsed with a faint, ancient light. Energy signature? Thorne asked. "That's the thing," Sarah said, her hands trembling slightly over the console. "It's not active. It's been dormant for... Captain, our instruments are estimating an age in the millions of years. Older than the conclave. Older than any civilization on record." The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of the Resolve's ailing engines. "Millions of years," Thorne repeated. "That's not possible. Every alien species we've ever met traces their civilization back. What, 50, 60,000 years at most?" "Exactly," Sarah said. "Which means whoever built that thing came before all of them." Thorne stared at the structure on the screen, something cold and electric crawling up his spine. The same feeling he'd had standing in the grand chamber, the conviction that exile wasn't punishment. It was a door. "Take us in," he said. Slow approach. Full scans. And Sarah, "Captain?" "Wake the science teams. All of them. I think we just found out why we were really sent out here." The approach took 6 days. As the fleet drew closer, the structure's true scale became apparent. Not a single object, but a vast network of interconnected towers, archways, and chambers, sprawled across nearly 400 kilometers of empty space, anchored to nothing, defying gravity as the alien civilizations understood it. When the first shuttle finally breached the structure's outer shell, what they found inside stole the breath from every soul aboard. Corridors of impossible architecture stretched in every direction, lit not by any visible power source, but by a soft ambient glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Symbols, not conclave script, not any language cataloged in humanity's archives, covered every surface, pulsing faintly as if responding to the presence of visitors after an eternity alone. And at the heart of it all, in a chamber the size of a cathedral, they found the first message. It activated the moment Thorne stepped across the threshold, light coalescing into a figure, tall and luminous, neither alien nor human, but something that felt impossibly old, impossibly patient. "Species detected," the figure said, in a voice that resonated through bone rather than air. "Biological classification. Human. Designation confirmed." Thorne froze. "Confirmed? You know what we are." The figure's light shifted, something almost like recognition passing through it. "We have been waiting," it said, "for you specifically, for 10 million years." What if everything you'd ever been taught about your place in the universe was a lie, and the truth was so much bigger and so much more terrifying than anyone could have prepared you for? The chamber filled with light as more figures emerged from the walls. Not holograms, the science teams quickly realized, but something closer to consciousness-given form, ancient intelligence preserved across an unimaginable span of time. "We are the last echo of the architects," the first figure said. "Builders of this structure. Builders of far more than this structure." Sarah stepped forward, her scientist's instinct for evidence overriding her fear. "Builders of what exactly?" The light pulsed, and the chamber around them transformed, the walls dissolving into a vast projection of the galaxy, stars wheeling in silent procession across 10 million years of compressed time. One by one, glowing points ignited across the map, each one a civilization born, rising, achieving stability. "Every major species in what you call the conclave," the figure said, "was seeded, shaped, and guided by us. The Veil, the Teshurim, the Karate, all of them, designed for harmony, for cooperation, for peace." We built a galaxy that would never again know the chaos that destroyed our own civilization. Thorn felt the floor seem to tilt beneath him, though the chamber hadn't moved at all. You're saying the entire Galactic Council, every species that judged us, was engineered, created, like livestock, like gardens, the figure corrected gently, cultivated for stability, for peace. We learned, long before your sun ignited, that civilizations built for conflict destroy themselves. So we removed the conflict. We removed the violence, the unpredictability, the chaos that breeds both destruction and innovation in equal measure. But not us, Sarah said slowly, understanding dawning in her voice like a sunrise she didn't want to see. The figure's light brightened, something that might have been approval or grief or both. Not you, it agreed. Humanity is different. Humanity is our final creation and our greatest risk. While every other species was built for stability, you were built for something else entirely. Adaptability, resilience, the refusal to surrender even when survival seems impossible. We gave you what we stripped from everyone else. The capacity for true chaos, true unpredictability, true courage in the face of annihilation. Thorn's mind raced back through every battle humanity had fought, every war the Conclave had condemned him for, every moment of stubborn, irrational refusal to simply give up. Not flaws, not failures. Design choices. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why would you build a species meant for war, and then hide that truth from us for our entire history? The chamber dimmed. The star map flickered, and across its glowing expanse, a shadow began to spread. Not light, but the absence of it, consuming entire clusters of stars in eerie, silent waves. Because, the figure said, we knew this day would come. The day the darkness returns. The word hung in the chamber like a held breath. The darkness destroyed us, the figure continued, its luminous form flickering with what could only be ancient, unhealed grief. 10 million years ago, we were the dominant power across 1,000 galaxies. We believed ourselves invincible. We were wrong. It came from beyond the boundaries of known space. Not a species, not a weapon, but something closer to an extinction event given will. It consumed everything. Stars, civilizations, entire galactic arms, erased from existence in the span of a few centuries. Sarah's hands had gone cold. And it's coming here. It has always been coming, the architect said. It moves slowly across the vastness of space, but it does not stop. It does not negotiate. It does not relent. The conclave you left behind has lived for 10,000 years in blissful ignorance, believing itself the pinnacle of existence, utterly unprepared for what is now less than 3 centuries from their borders. Thorn stared at the spreading shadow on the star map, and for the first time since the Council had cast humanity into exile, he understood the full, staggering weight of what had actually happened. They hadn't been thrown away. They'd been saved for a purpose no one, not even humanity itself, had ever imagined. What does it cost to save a galaxy that once called you a monster? The architects had an answer, and it was far more terrible than anyone expected. The revelation didn't end with the darkness. The architects led the human delegation deeper into the structure, through corridors that stretched for kilometers, until they reached a chamber unlike anything they had yet seen, a vast control nexus, its walls embedded with what looked like star charts mapping not just a Milky Way, but points scattered across its entire breadth. 200,004 sites, the architect said, as the chamber illuminated each location across the projected galaxy, glowing points spread across every arm, every cluster, every region humanity and the conclave together call home. Defensive installations, built by us, in the final centuries before our fall, as humanity's true inheritance. Each one capable of generating a shield powerful enough to protect an entire star system from the darkness. Sarah moved closer to projection, tracing the pattern of installations with trembling fingers. 200,000 sites scattered across the entire galaxy. That could protect everyone. The conclave, every species they ever cultivated. Yes, the architect said, but understand the price before you celebrate the gift. The chamber shifted again, and this time it showed not stars, but a single installation up close, a colossal spire of dark, ancient metal, its core pulsing faintly with dormant energy, waiting. Each installation requires activation, the architect continued. Not through code, not through power cells, through sacrifice, a willing human life given freely, to bind the installation's defenses to the will and resilience that only humanity carries within its biology. We built you to be the key, Captain Thorne. The price of unlocking each shield is one human soul, given in full knowledge and full consent. The room went utterly silent. Thorne felt something twist deep in his chest, not fear, but a grim, aching recognition. 200,000 installations, 200,000 lives. He thought of the children born in the void, who had never seen Earth's sky. He thought of every soldier he'd buried, every family torn apart by war, every sacrifice his species had already made simply to survive long enough to reach this moment. And now the architects were asking for more. "Why us?" Sarah said, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Why does it always have to be us who pays the price for everyone else's survival?" The architect's light dimmed, something almost like sorrow passing through its ancient form. "Because you're the only ones who can," it said simply. "We did not choose this burden lightly. We built your species knowing this day would come, knowing the cost we would ask of you. It was the cruelest, most necessary decision we ever made. We are sorry, but the alternative is extinction. For you, for the Conclave, for every star this galaxy still holds." Thorne stood in silence for a long moment, staring at the glowing map of 200,000 scattered installations. A galaxy's worth of salvation. Purchase one human life at a time. "We didn't ask to be made for this," he finally said. "But we're not going to refuse it either. That's not who we are." He turned to Sarah, to the science teams, to the soldiers who had followed him across decades of exile and uncertainty. "Give me a list," he said. "Every installation we can reach. Every volunteer willing to step forward. We have a galaxy to save, including the people who threw us away to die. Imagine walking back into the room that sentenced you to death. Not for revenge, not for justice, but to save the very people who condemned you. That took more courage than any war humanity had ever fought. The return to Conclave space was, by any measure, an act of suicidal courage. 23 years had passed since humanity's exile, and Thorne had no guarantee the Council wouldn't simply destroy his ship on sight, rather than allow the dangerous species back across the threshold. But he went anyway, accompanied only by Sarah, a small honor guard, and an architect projection unit, carrying proof of everything they had discovered. The Grand Chamber looked exactly as it had the day they were exiled. The same floating sigils, the same shifting light of Hesave presiding as speaker, the same hum of 10,000 species who believed themselves secure in their place atop the galactic order. The murmur that swept through the chamber. When Thorne walked back, it was different this time. Not contempt. Shock. "Representative Thorne," Hesave said, light flickering with something between alarm and disbelief. "You were instructed never to return to Conclave space." "I came to save your lives," Thorne said, his voice carrying through the vast chamber without need for amplification. "Whether you believe me is up to you, but I'd rather you hear it from someone you exiled than discover it when it's too late to matter." He gestured, and the architect projection unit activated, filling the chamber with the same star map that had shown humanity the truth weeks before. The spreading shadow of the darkness, the scattered installations, the full, staggering history of a galaxy built entirely on a foundation none of them had ever known existed. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Delegates shouted in 100 different languages. Sigils flashed with alarm, and Hesave's light flared erratically as 10,000 years of certainty crumbled in the span of a single presentation. "This is fabrication," one delegate snarled, a karate representative whose crystalline form trembled with fury. "A trick to regain the citizenship you were rightfully denied." "Then explain the installation 30 light years from this very chamber," Thorne replied evenly. "That's been sitting dormant in your own territory for 10 million years, completely undetected by your sensors, exactly where the architect said it would be. We've already verified it. Send your own scientists. Verify it yourselves." The chamber fell into a tense, uncertain silence. It took 11 days. 11 days of Conclave scientists scouring records, dispatching scout ships, and finally, reluctantly, disbelievingly, confirming every word of what Thorne had told them. The ancient insulation was real. The architect's technology was real. And the darkness, when finally detected by conclave long-range sensors, was real, closer than anyone had dared imagine. Its leading edge already swallowing the outer dwarf galaxies at the edge of detection range. Hesevay stood before the reconvened council, light dim with something that looked, for the first time in 10,000 years, like genuine fear. "What do you need from us?" the speaker asked quietly. "To survive what's coming." Thorne looked across the chamber that had once condemned his entire species as too dangerous to exist among civilized worlds, and felt no satisfaction in the moment, only grim resolve. "Cooperation," he said, "resources, and trust, the one thing you never gave us when it mattered most. We're not asking for citizenship anymore. We're telling you that humanity is the only thing standing between this galaxy and extinction. The only question is whether you're willing to stand with us, or watch us do it alone. This is the moment everything had been building toward. The moment humanity, once called too dangerous to exist, would either save the galaxy or be consumed alongside it." The darkness arrived 18 months later, exactly as the architect had predicted. Not as an invasion fleet, not as an army, but as an absence given terrible purpose, swallowing entire star systems in silent, inexorable waves that conventional weapons couldn't touch and conventional physics couldn't explain. By then, humanity and the Conclave had mobilized everything they had. Joint fleets stretched across the galaxy's outer rim. Conclave engineers worked alongside human scientists to map every one of the 200,000 ancient installations, and volunteers, humans from every colony, every generation, every corner of the Exodus fleet, stepped forward in numbers that broke Thorne's heart with their courage. Sarah found him in the command center of the Resolve the night before the first wave of activations, staring at a list of names that would soon be added to a memorial no one had yet built. "You don't have to be the first one," she said quietly. "Yes," Thorne said. "I do." He had expected resistance. Instead, Sarah simply nodded, understanding without needing to be told that a captain who had led his people into exile, into discovery, into impossible sacrifice, could not ask others to walk into the dark without walking in himself. The installation nearest the threshold activated at 0400 hours. Thorne stepped into the ancient chamber alone, the same chamber design he had first seen on the architect's structure years before, and placed his hand against the dormant core. Activation requires full consent. The installation's voice intoned, ancient and patient. "Confirm." "Confirmed," Thorne said, and for a moment he thought of Earth's sky, of the children who had never seen it, of a council that had once called his species too violent to deserve a place among the stars. "I just want them to know," he said quietly, to no one and everyone, "that we never stopped trying, even when no one believed in us. Especially then." The chamber filled with light. What followed was the greatest battle the galaxy had ever witnessed. 200,000 installations igniting one by one across the breadth of the Milky Way, each powered by a human life freely given, each shield a small, defiant flame against an enemy that had erased entire galaxies without resistance. Conclave fleets fought alongside human ships at every front. Alien scientists worked beside human engineers to develop weapons theory that defied everything either civilization had previously understood about physics. And for the first time in galactic history, every species fought not for territory, not for power, but for each other's survival. The war lasted 4 years. It cost more lives than anyone wanted to count. Human, alien, soldier, scientist, volunteer. But installation by installation, system by system, the shields held. The darkness, which had consumed 1,000 galaxies without ever meeting true resistance, met something it had never encountered before, a species willing to give everything, sacrifice everything, sustain hope to the darkest possible circumstances, simply because giving up was never in their nature. In the final battle, fought at the edge of the galaxy's outer rim, the combined fleets of every conclave species and the remaining human Exodus fleet activated the last installation simultaneously, sealing the darkness beyond a barrier the architects had designed 10 million years before but never lived to complete. The shadow that had erased 1,000 galaxies finally, impossibly, retreated, pushed back into a void beyond known space, sealed away by the very species the galaxy had once judged too dangerous to exist. In the aftermath, the Grand Chamber convened once more, not to judge, but to honor. Hesave stood before the assembled delegates, light steady for the first time since the war began, and spoke words that 10,000 years of conclave history had never required. "We were wrong," the speaker said simply. "Humanity was not our greatest danger. Humanity was our salvation, and we nearly threw it away out of fear of what we did not understand." The council voted, unanimously this time, to grant humanity not just citizenship, but a permanent seat of honor among the founding species of a new galactic order, one built, finally, on the truth the architects had hidden for 10 million years. Thorne, who had survived the activation of his installation against every reasonable expectation, stood before the chamber one final time. They offered him command of the new order, supreme authority over the rebuilding galaxy, more power than any single being had held since the architects themselves. He refused. "We didn't fight for power," he said. "We fought because giving up was never something we knew how to do. That's not a throne. That's just who we are. Let's rebuild this galaxy as partners. Not because one species rules over the rest, but because we finally learned what the architects always knew. Strength isn't found in stability. It's found in the courage to keep fighting when everything tells you to stop." He looked out at the chamber, humans and aliens, soldiers and scientists, survivors and grieving families, and felt, for the first time since that day he had bowed before the conclave and walked into exile, something that felt very much like peace. Humanity had been judged unfit for civilization. Instead, they became the reason civilization survived.